Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans and you're watching the John Cedars channel. Again, not from the bunker, but from our car. And we're still on holiday. For those of you who are concerned that I'm working too much, we have had some very relaxing days, haven't we?
Yeah.
So it's not work, but I wanted to just do another quick video because one or two mentioned that they liked having you, Dijana, from your perspective.
I don't know why.
Your wisdom on camera.
I don't feel like I have any wisdom on the subject, but
Nonsense. So yeah, while we've got this kind of thing set up with the camera and everything, why not do another video? And the thing I'd like to, well, I've got mixed feelings about talking about it, but I would sort of like to talk about it, and that's...
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't. But that's aggressive activism. Because we're coming up to, I think it was November 2014 when I did my video on aggressive activism, where I distanced myself from it. And I'm going to clarify what I mean by aggressive activism. But I made that video nearly 5 years ago, and I've maybe referred to my thoughts on the subject once or twice since then in rebuttals, but I haven't done a video just on that subject in nearly 5 years. And for the most part, it's because once you share your thoughts on it, you don't really need to keep repeating yourself. You've said what you have to say, and you can let people decide for themselves what they think, and that's been my approach. And you were there, weren't you, Dijana, in 2017 when we were in LA for the we did like an event in LA for the Truth About the Truth and a book signing, and someone stood up.
Yeah, I was there.
And you know, I'm not going to say confronted. They had a question about aggressive activism as someone who believed in aggressive activism and believed it was effective, and they wanted me to comment on it. And my answer was, and in a way still is, well, I've spoken about it on camera, I've written about it in books and in blog articles. Anyone who wants to know what I think about aggressive activism can find my thoughts very easily online. But the great thing is that now we're all out of a cult, we all get to have our own ideas on these things. So it's okay for you to think differently.
Yeah, it's okay to disagree. Agree to disagree.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I want to come back to this, is to drive home that point that it is okay to disagree with me on this. I don't expect everyone to see things the same way, and I also want to, you know, I wouldn't say my opinion has changed in any way, but I have over the last 5 years had more time to kind of think about it and the various nuances of it. And so I thought maybe it might be interesting to go over that. And also, I've just done the Freemasons video and re-uploaded the paranormal experiences video, so we may as well make it a trinity of controversial subjects.
I think Freemasons one was the most controversial.
But the Freemasons one, just going back to what I was saying earlier, the Freemasons one was nothing compared to the backlash we got in 2014 when I first made that video. And that video was prompted by kind of a flurry of videos appearing on Facebook of people behaving in confrontational ways towards Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were almost being uploaded like trophies, you know, like when your cat brings like a dead mouse in and like, oh, please be happy, you know.
Yeah.
And I wasn't happy, and it got to the point where I thought, no one's really kind of kicking back against this, and if it means I have to be kicked back against it, I will do. And the backlash was just insane. It's no exaggeration, Dijana, to say that there were individuals who were annoyed at me for expressing an honest view on aggressive activism that wanted to destroy me.
Well, you know, I've been there. I know. I know how I got the backlash of it. I had nothing to do with it, by the way. You know, it was your channel, your decision to talk about it, and basically, I was my only connection with activism was supporting you. And somehow I got roped into it, where I was attacked, or people were talking about me online, or they were petitioning to save me from you and things like that. It was absolutely ridiculous. I've got private messages of all sorts, even some how to divorce abusive husband and things like that. And I'm thinking, you have no idea, like, where are you getting all these things that you are projecting? It's just in your head. So I know how bad it got. It spiraled from people disagreeing with you to people wanting to assume the worst of you, and then it didn't stop there. It went to, their family, how can we save them from him? You know, it was just ridiculous.
I find the whole damsel in distress thing rather sexist to begin with, as though,
like, I don't have mind on my own.
You need saving from me.
Like, I can't think for myself.
Yeah, but yeah, if imagine the worst thing that you can accuse someone of, to try and destroy their reputation, and that's pretty much what I had thrown at me. And in a way, I'm still the reverberations from that video 5 years ago. In a way, we're still feeling it. You know, the resentment never really went away.
And some people I considered really dear to me, you know, I have no longer any kind of connection with, because they went completely the other way. And you know, I can't be friends with them if they're saying absolutely worst of you without knowing you completely. You know, 1 or 2 meetups is not gonna tell them what kind of person you are day to day.
When you say they went completely the other way, do you mean it wasn't just simply a case of them?
Oh my goodness, I feel like we shouldn't be talking about this.
Okay, well, we don't have to name any names, but we're not talking about people who just said I disagree. We're talking about people who kind of jumped on the anti-Cedars bandwagon. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. But I don't want to expand on that whatsoever.
Okay.
Because.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's sad, isn't it? That
I don't like to talk about this.
I know, because no one likes, well, not no one. Some people do enjoy ruffling feathers, and some people do enjoy igniting controversy. We just don't happen to be those sorts of people, do we?
Yeah, for example, people can make all sorts of videos online. I won't even notice, because I don't, first of all, follow those kinds of videos, and second of all, I'm not interested. But when other people are sending me videos, look at this, look at that, you're mentioned here, you're mentioned there, at that point I was interested in what they were saying, and it was bringing me down. And it all stemmed from people who disagree with you to begin with on your aggressive activism stance. And I would say the reason why you wanted to make that video as well was so your goal was to wake up witnesses, and if witnesses came across those kinds of videos and then came to yours, you wanted to distinguish yourself as somebody who is not gonna attack them in their kingdom hall or their place of worship, even though you highly disagree with the teachings. but you still respect their right to. Well, it's not even about respecting their right to, observe whatever they want. It's more to do with you not wanting to basically counteract everything else you're doing. Because when people are attacked, they get defensive, and it's not opening up discussion. It's just branding everybody as, all these apostates are just as literature tells they are.
I wanted to distance myself, like you say, because I didn't want people assuming that I was okay with that sort of thing. And just to be clear, I mentioned earlier that I've had time to kind of think about it further, and I think that, as in many areas of life, there is nuance, and I think that there are gradations of aggressive or confrontational behaviour toward Jehovah's Witnesses. So it's not like they're all as bad, or hi Julia, they're not all as bad or as counterproductive as the other. So for example, we have friends who have protested outside of conventions. It's not something I would feel comfortable doing myself, but I can't begrudge someone their right, if they want to, if they feel like it, to stand outside of a convention with a sign and try to, turning the wrong way, and try to, in a peaceful way, raise awareness outside of a public gathering. It's one thing to do that with a sign, whether or not it's effective, and it's another thing entirely, in my view, to go into a place of worship and interfere with a religious gathering. I think that personally crosses a line between potentially effective or ineffective to, downright, not just ineffective, but just downright inappropriate behaviour to go into a religious gathering. So I think there are gradations of aggressive activism, and they're not all as bad as each other, and that's probably something that I haven't clarified before, that I wanted to express in this video.
Right. I don't know, for me, when I think about protests and everything, I'm thinking whether it's going to be effective for witnesses to wake up. If it's going to do opposite, I think it's not worth it, and I always try and think from the viewpoint of a witness, how they feel. And obviously I was a witness for 30 years of my life or so. And I remember seeing those signs, and I just thought those are mad people. I just genuinely thought these people are,
not that we're calling people who hold signs mad, but yeah.
No, I'm not calling anybody mad. I'm just honestly saying what I was thinking as a witness, And it wasn't effective on me or anybody that I personally knew. So for that reason, and I still know people who are witnesses, obviously, and for that reason I don't think it's effective.
I think you've made a good point though, and that is that, that's the question, what are your motives for doing it? And that's all I was really interested in kind of highlighting to begin with when I first addressed this. It's why can we not have a conversation about why this is being done? If it's purely for helping witnesses, then you have to ask, is this the right way of going about it? But if it's purely for catharsis and to make you feel better, is it not is it not an area of concern if your catharsis comes at the expense of others, if it means delaying someone else's escape from the movement because they're seeing before them in their mind, the embodiment of what an apostate would look and sound like.
And I've heard another reasoning, we're doing it for the victims of such and such abuse, to kind of support them. If you think of victims, you're basically just then helping certain number of victims, because there are victims still in, and you're not helping them by doing that. So why are those victims that are out more important than those who are potentially going to go out? They all deserve happy life, and the way to help victims, I think, is to provide them counseling, to help them recover in the best way, and not just to lash out with anger on somebody who is victim themselves, because most of people who are in the Kingdom Hall are victims, and the problems are coming from the top, with policies that are enabling those who are with bad motives and who are doing atrocious things. Those from the top are enabling those individuals to do that. But I would say that a large number of those publishers you find in the Kingdom Hall, that you're addressing them in their Kingdom Hall, are actually just victims themselves of indoctrination and circumstance.
I think that you've hit on an interesting thing there, which is when victims of child sex abuse are involved in the protesting, that's when it takes on another kind of layer of nuance, where you're thinking, well, would you really frown on someone who's really suffered at the hands of the organisation in the worst possible way? Would you really frown on them expressing themselves about what's happened to them? And of course I have sympathy for them, and of course I'm more on their side than I could ever be on the side of those that they are protesting towards. But you still have the problem of them. Let's say you have a child sex abuse victim go into a Crasher Kingdom Hall. You still have a problem of them protesting towards people who couldn't change the policies if they wanted to, who have to follow whatever it is that the governing body are telling them, and have to interpret any form of incursion on their peaceful gathering as an act of malice, as someone who doesn't have their interests in mind, and who is purely venting for nefarious reasons. So even in that situation I struggle, and that's one of the real heartrending examples where you think, is this perhaps a good time to do it?
Yeah. Well, I'd have more to say about that, but we're here, so maybe at the time.
Yeah, so we're now at the shopping mall where we were heading to.
Because we are going for indoor playground.
Because Jessica's going to the indoor playground. Are you looking forward to the indoor playground, Jessica?
Can you please count how many children had to go in the indoor playground? And if you can do it, tell Mommy, because I want to know when I'm going in.
We're going to get a number.
Jessica wants to know where in the queue she is for the indoor playground. No problem, darling. So we'll leave it there for now, and we will return on our way back to just tie up the conversation.
Okay.
So we've finished our rather lengthy trip to the shopping mall that always ends up lasting longer. You go into these places and honestly, time just slips away from you. But anyway, enough of that. Back to the subject at hand. And you were saying, just as you and I were walking in, that the whole aggressive activism thing reminded you of, in a way, of veganism.
Yeah, I want to become vegan, so I want to transfer to plant-based diet, mostly because of environmental issues, but also there is cruelty issue and stuff. So, but when you go on some of these channels where they're talking about veganism, or if you post something like, oh, I want to, but I really like cheese, and then somebody bashes you. Oh, how dare you eat cheese? You're scum of the earth for eating cheese, instead of saying something like, oh, well done for at least ditching, what you can and trying to do better for environment. When they come on so aggressively and almost cold-like, or almost like I can't explain it. In a way of talking down to you, you just become defensive and put off by even wanting to try, because you think, what's the point? If I can't make small changes. Well, I'm thinking if we start attacking witnesses in the Kingdom Hall, they might be put off by our whole approach and think, well, what's the point of even trying to research anything, because that's how I'm gonna end up if I leave, or that's how people who leave end up.
So with veganism, the information is there on why veganism is a good thing. I'm, by the way, not vegan, although I have a lot of admiration for veganism, and it is a conscience, it's something that's weighing on my conscience to some extent. But the information's there for those who are interested in veganism and want to know why people are vegan, and so that they can reach their decisions. It would be, but for people to kind of get in people's faces and make people feel bad for not being vegan, you're comparing that to people who get in the faces of Jehovah's Witnesses. And rather than letting witnesses find the information when they're at the right place, or rather than engaging in like a meaningful dialogue, making witnesses feel bad and basically putting them on the defensive. That's the comparison, is it?
Yeah, you put it much better than I do.
No, I just want to make sure that's what the comparison is, and I think it's a good one, because ultimately we persuade people through dialogue, really. You can't just... it's a little bit like, what's that film, Inception, where they have like a whole team that go into people's dreams because they realise that they can't influence people to do something unless it's at a certain level of dream state or something. And in a way that's true of influencing people in general. You can't just program someone to have the right attitude towards something, or to stop being wrong about something, just by thrusting information in the faces of people. It has to be an organic process, but it seems to me that those who espouse confrontational or aggressive forms of activism have a very naive expectation that just by, again, thrusting information in people's faces, that they're just going to shed deeply cherished beliefs and think, oh well, if you hadn't told me that sooner, if only you told me that sooner, I would have I'd already be woken up. So
sorry, I thought you were not recording.
No, it is recording.
Yeah, it's I don't expect people to agree with how I'm thinking about it, or even understand how I feel. I'm just explaining where my thoughts are coming from in relation to the subject.
Ultimately, it all boils down to being able to agree to disagree. And I don't lose any sleep if someone hears my ideas and says, you know what, I take that on board, Lloyd, but I'm still going to protest outside a convention. That's perfectly fine. And again, I've got friends who have done that and who do that. I do feel differently for the reasons I've expressed about people who actually go into Kingdom Halls and behave in such a confrontational way. I just cannot think, no matter how I kind of process things through my head. But even then, you know, it's not like I'm going to name and shame people who do that. It really has to be a case of presenting your arguments and letting them stand or fall on their own merits and letting people decide for themselves what works and what doesn't work. But one thing I've heard people say is that aggressive activism is loaded language. So the term aggressive activism is loaded language intended to manipulate people away from doing that. And just to set the record straight, again, it was back in 2014 when I made my video, and I'm pretty sure I coined that term. I mean, if anyone else wants to claim it from me, I'm not going to battle them for it, but I'm pretty sure I coined that term myself, aggressive activism, and it certainly wasn't loaded language. It was the most accurate term I could think of to explain a form of activism that is aggressive, because aggression doesn't have to mean violence. Aggression is just being confrontational. So
coming off as aggressive to the other side.
Yeah. So there's violent aggression and there's non-violent aggression, and there are phrases like aggressive. Yes, sweetheart. Not this time, darling. Maybe another playground. And there's such a phrase as aggressive sales techniques. That doesn't mean a salesperson is attacking someone physically.
Yeah, tackling them down. You will buy this product.
It means that they are being very blunt and very
in your face,
saying you ought to buy this. You'd be a fool not to buy this product, and that's aggressive sales. In the same way, aggressive activism is confronting witnesses and pushing the information in their faces rather than letting them find the information themselves, or rather than trying to engage in meaningful dialogue, which I would say is street epistemology if anyone's interested. So it kind of does, it's unfortunate that people would suggest that by using the phrase aggressive activism that anyone's trying to manipulate anyone. That simply isn't true. It's an accurate expression. And as far as I'm aware, even some who engage in aggressive activism have kind of almost very proudly taken that expression on to describe themselves. What was the other thing I wanted to talk about?
Is it
loaded language? Oh yeah, there's this idea that if it's legal, it's okay. So we're having a peaceful protest, therefore it's okay. It's peaceful. No one is attacking anyone violently. As long as no laws are being broken, therefore you can't even call it aggressive activism. Everything's fine as long as no laws are being broken and as long as no one is being physically assaulted. And I can't fathom how. I mean, there's any number of ways that you could be aggressive towards someone and that they would interpret that as being aggression towards them without any laws being broken, you know.
Yeah, and there is a number of things in life that are legal illegal, but you wouldn't want them to happen to you.
It's like I hate quoting verses, but there is that verse: all things are lawful, but not all things are advantageous. And that is kind of true if you think about it. It doesn't mean it's divinely inspired, of course. You know, even a clock is right twice. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. But yeah, it is true. Just because you are legally allowed to do something and there is no law against you doing that thing, it doesn't make it advisable. And when you're dealing with cult believers, cult followers, whose brains are enmeshed in this complex, malevolent belief structure that has their will and determination entirely in its grasp. And if your aim is to extricate someone from that situation, it's a very delicate process. It's something that I think almost anyone who goes through that process realizes takes a lot of time, takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of soul searching. I would go so far as to say it's an art to helping people out of that situation. And the way I've likened it before is if you go to the dentist's and the dentist is there with his assistant and says, Deirdre, could you just hand me the meat cleaver, please? You know, you're going to be panicking. You're going to, excuse me, may I interject? Or, you know, if you're under gas. But you can go at it with a meat cleaver, or you can go at it with fine tools that are designed for. And as far as I'm concerned, confronting people in an aggressive, domineering, confrontational, derisive way is like going at it with a meat cleaver. It really doesn't work. But again, you are allowed to disagree with me on this.
And the funny thing is, for some individuals, I think they're really there are rare cases, but for some it will actually work, you know.
Yes.
So that's the funny thing about it. But because there are a few that it works for them, that kind of approach, because probably they end up gonna do that themselves. They're that kind of people. I'm not saying they're bad people.
No.
I'm just saying, you know. Then people who like to engage in that sort of activism will say, well, it works. But I would say not for majority, because just based off knowing all the witnesses that I knew, I know that it wouldn't work on them. I know for 100% that it wouldn't work on them, and it would just make them retreat even more in the organization.
I'm really glad you raised that point, because I would have missed that. That is something that you hear people say. Proponents of aggressive activism will say, we know it works because here's an example of someone who saw a protest and engaged in dialogue with the protesters, or saw a sign and later went and did research, and it prompted them to get out. And I'm not disputing in any way, shape or form that might happen. Some people could respond to being treated rudely or in a very kind of aggressive, confrontational way. I'm not denying that could happen. But if you have something that works in only a tiny minority of cases, but for the majority pushes people further away, the principle of best practice would lead you to say, well, I'm going to use the way that's going to help everyone and has zero drawbacks.
Because those people who woke up due to somebody storming into a Kingdom Hall, maybe could have woken up also by other means.
By the gentler means, yeah.
Yeah, maybe they just needed to hear the information, and it's available online. So when they're ready to take a leap to see more, they would find plenty of resources, even videos that are a little bit more kind of more heavy on witnesses than maybe yours are.
Yeah. I do accept that different approaches and different styles to activism will appeal to different individuals, and there will even be some individuals who respond to the aggressive, confrontational style. But again, I personally, speaking for myself, I'd rather engage in the form of activism that kind of has blanket coverage, that covers as many types of people as possible, without knocking the majority further into the cult by again reinforcing the apostate stereotype of someone who's jumping up and down and being angry and hurling abuse or disrupting meetings and that kind of thing. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, it's okay. The only other thing I would say is that I don't want people to think, oh, we know the best. We think we know the best. That's not the case at all. I'm saying my point of view just from what I know. I don't know everything, and I don't know the best. This is just the best of my knowledge.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I'm better or that I think that I'm better or that I know better of anything else. It's just based on experiences, what people are saying. That's how I'm basing this opinion.
We need to be able to express our views and our ideas and our opinions on a take it or leave it basis, simply saying this works for me, and this I found that this, on the other hand, is counterproductive, without it being a case of what you've said I disagree with and I'm going to destroy you, and that's, I think, one of the most regrettable aspects of working within the ex-JW environment is that you have that mindset, which I think is carried over from people being witnesses, where if you're wrong, if you don't conform to the approved narrative, then you're worthy of annihilation.
Yeah, you can criticize somebody's work or techniques without going personal, without going deeper and character assassinate them, or try and cause problems in their family or something like that. You can disagree, and you can even make counter video saying why you disagree, based on purely on the subject, rather than going into, oh, he's like this or like that, she's this and that, and
absolutely. So I think we've basically covered everything there, and
it feels weird really talking about it. And
it does, but there were so many. I mean, I made my video again nearly 5 years ago, and it was more a case of expressing as clearly as I could why I felt the way I felt. But again, in the 5 years since then, I've heard some of the counter arguments. Julia's trying to get a spot on this video.
Yeah.
I've heard the counter arguments, and I've also been able to, think more about my own position, and especially as regards there being gradations of aggressive activism that are, more or less agreeable, if that makes sense. So, anyway, that's about it. Before Julia really hits her Evans baritone with her screaming.
She's actually laughing at the back. She's playing with muslin cloth and going excited, going.
So, viewers, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more such videos. But for now, thank you so much for watching.